dreckiges Lachen vergeht, wenn ihr euer eigenes Blut fließen seht. Die Waffengemeinschaft Germaniens steht, für ein Entkommen ist es jetzt zu spät.
I've got one that can see.
Where there's thunder, there's lightning. John Nada. We live in an upside-down pyramid. The language of the culture has changed, and in one way this is apparent, is in what women, or the empire at large, view as abuse and call rape. I don't really have to say a whole lot about the whole rape issue. I think that anybody that's been in the manosphere for any period of time, anybody that has been MGTOW for any period of time, can see how the word rape is now very nuanced. It now could apply to and describe almost any act that a male does without the consent of the female, up to and including a glance. And real rape, actual rape, rape in and of itself being a violent act, one of force, is pretty trivialized in Western society and mainstream media at large. It's almost a joke anymore because now rape could constitute the girl feeling guilty or changing her mind the next morning or 10 years down the road. But this is an example of how the culture has tried to make the language malleable to fit its narrative. One thing that I don't know if it's been addressed, it's really something that I have been thinking about the last couple of weeks. And I don't know that it's really been addressed, but one of the biggest words that has been redefined is that of abuse. And I mentioned it on this program a while back about how talk to most any female, and they all have that abusive ex-boyfriend in the past. And they never quite clarify how he was abusive. You know, they don't say that, well, he didn't hit me. Well, he didn't, yell at me per se. He was just abusive. He was just abusive. And they don't ever really define how it was that they abused them. And a lot of the times, it was emotional abuse or mental abuse. And what I have found after having dated here and there and had a few long-term relationships here and there, that at some point, I think that I was probably somebody's abusive ex-boyfriend. Now, let me clarify that with this. What they mean, what's really being said here when somebody says an abusive ex, what the empire and what women are actually saying is that it wasn't that they were abusive in the conventional sense, but the nomenclature has now been changed to include not being a doormat. If you're not a doormat for the girl, then you're abusive. If you don't, if you refuse to be a doormat and you don't make yourself into her veritable slave and servant, you're seen as being bad for her and not working out. And also, in some cases, seen as being abusive because of that. Yet, if you give in to her demands and whims, you are eventually obsolete as she chases the next bad boy that she hopes to tame. She feels as if she is made to feel hard to love when you express any individuality. That point right there. It could almost be, if you express any individuality or any dissenting opinion, that could be almost misconstrued in and of itself as abuse and abusive as well. And here's the thing with a lot of these so-called abusive ex-boyfriends and all that. Let's just say for a minute, because I know that those situations do exist, and oftentimes what I have seen personally firsthand, physically abused women often go back to their abuser for one reason or the other. In fact, in a domestic violence situation, it's one of the most dangerous situations to be in, because as you're confronting the so-called abuser, man or woman, but let's just say in this case it's a man, um, as people are trying to deal with the situation, it's oftentimes the woman who then becomes violent towards the very people that they called out to quote unquote protect them. Um, it's almost as if they just want the show, but they don't want the consequences to go along with the show. And I've spoken with many friends of mine who are in the law enforcement field who say oftentimes you have to have one eye looking at the individual you're dealing with directly, and the other eye at the quote unquote victim, because uh, you know, for whatever reason, oftentimes they become violent themselves if they weren't already violent to begin with, and that's a whole nother um, discussion we can have on who actually initiates most of the physical disturbances. But getting back to the point, these women know that these guys are the way that they are. They choose them knowingly. And even after having broken away from the situation, they get back with them, and the cycle continues with it. A lot of women would rather be with a beater than to ever have to be alone and, you know, by proxy, be with their own thoughts. It's more important to be with somebody. That way I'm not alone and I don't have to think about my life. But what a lot of people do, what we have done is back when we were blue pilled, we instituted our own morality and thought. We tried to project that onto the women we were with, the women we dated. And you simply can't do that because your morality is not their morality. And so, you think as a decent person, well, if I treat her good, she'll do this, or she'll be this way, or she'll want to be with me. And oftentimes, that is not the case. It's kind of switching gears here. Was listening to a Steve Hoka video the other day, most recent one that he put out, and his assertion is that MGTOW will well be dead by the end of 2017. That MGTOW is well on its way to dwindling. And yet, if you look at what's going on with the MGTOW community, so to speak, more and more content contributors are cropping up, more and more people. I mean, this channel grows tenfold every day, every week, along with other channels that continue to grow. So people are hearing the message. Now, I don't know how he can assert that MGTOW will be dead by the end of 2017, because MGTOW is not going to go anywhere, because it's not a movement. MGTOW is inside of all of us. So as long as one of us is going our own way, MGTOW will always be about. And that's the thing, because in MGTOW, we're not building on sinking sand here. We're not, and that's where I kind of want to segue into the next point is a lot of these guys, get into these relationships, these really blue-pilled, fueled individuals, and they well devote their whole lives to the girl that they're with, and everything is built around them. Every breath they take, every decision that they make is based upon pleasing this girl, giving everything that this girl wants to her, all that. But yet what they've done is they've built their house on the sinking sand rather than the rock. Because as we know, women are well fueled by their emotions. They go based off to a large extent whatever they're feeling at that moment. So like the sand, their emotions shift constantly. Now I say all that to say this. I put a video out, and I think it's becoming a theme with this podcast. You piss a few off, you make a few happy. But anyway, the was kind of because, and the reason I bring this up is because I'm getting sick of hearing about how guys in MGTOW are virgin losers that could never get a girl anyway. I mean, this is Steve Hoka's whole assertion is that we're MGTOW because we can't get women. Well, some of us are MGTOW because we've had our fill of women. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the reason I'm where I'm at is because I just saw the lunacy of a lot of women. And this whole idea that, like, I mean, it's bullocks, man. I mean, we don't, and everybody knows it. I mean, all it is an attempt to try to shut us down. But I have seen with the last girl that I dated, and I always knew it was true. So I didn't need to see this to know that it was true because I had seen it other times. But this is the first time I've really been on the other side of it. And with the last girl that I dated, or my ex-girlfriend, or whatever you want to call it, I'm seeing played out the whole alpha fucks, beta bucks dichotomy. Because the guy that she is with, and I brought this up in one of the last videos, is, I mean, if you saw the guy, you would think beta, blue pill, cuck. I mean, he's got the beard, everything. And he's not ambitious. I mean, he's building his life on the sinking sand that is this girl who is as neurotic as can be, rather than trying to think about what he wants out of life and what he would like to do goal wise. I mean, everything is about pleasing this girl. And the thing is it took her, you know, and these were some of the statements that she made when we had talked or whatever, but she would have never, 5 years ago, she would have never dated a guy like this. In fact, she was engaged to a guy at one time, and the bad boy, alpha boyfriend she had before him convinced her to break that off. So she broke that off. And then I found out recently that the night that she was supposed to get married to this guy, she was at I guess it was at a hotel or something, in a jacuzzi making a sex tape with the alpha bad boy boyfriend, who she actually moved in with for a period of time after we broke up. But I bring all that up to say that this guy doesn't know this girl's sexual history. I mean, it was so astronomical, I think, that she didn't even want to tell me what the number was because she was embarrassed. This was the same girl that slept with me on the first date. You know, I mean, basically the second time we'd ever met. And I can guarantee you that this guy probably had to wait and had to really put in a lot of effort and spend some capital to get what the rest of us got up front and for low cost. And I feel somewhat bad for the guy, because it's a prime example of, you know, she just turned 26. She's gained, she was a little chubby when I met her, but she's gained a considerable amount of weight since we dated. And it's the prime example of, I'm ready to settle down now for the beta. But the fact of the matter is, because she said as much the last time I talked to her, that she would, I mean, if given half of a chance, if, and I think I said this in the last video, but if you're curious about what I look like, and this is not me saying this, but if you're curious at all about what I look like, according to her, I look just like Tom Hardy. Now, this is more Tom Hardy, you know, via Warrior, but the point is, she would probably cheat on this guy for me because the tingles are there, and probably always will be. Now, I wouldn't do that. I'm not that kind of a guy, but it's just a classic example. Alpha fucks and beta bucks. Now that she's got this mileage on her, now that she's got all this history, now that, you know, her best days are behind her and the product has been well worn, now she's ready for the nice guy. Well, as always, if you don't like the program, don't listen. This has been John Nada, and these have been the Days of Thunder. Remember, you're free to do as you're told.